The holographic transmission materialized above the United Nations assembly floor without warning, slicing through every layer of Earth's security as if it were nothing more than paper. Ambassador Helen Carter froze at her podium as an alien figure coalesced before the stunned delegates, its crystalline body bending light in painful, unnatural ways. When it spoke, its words came in flawless English, though everyone understood that the voice was only a projection of some unfathomably advanced technology. The being introduced itself as an emissary of the Zthrian Concordant, declaring that humanity had been watched, studied, and judged. It accused Earth's people of reckless expansion into the outer colonies, of militarizing their frontier, and of refusing to recognize the authority of the Galactic Concordant. Now, it said, the time of reckoning had come. The chamber exploded into chaos, representatives shouting questions and protests, but the hologram continued as if none of them existed. Its ultimatum was clear and merciless. Humanity had 72 hours to surrender every military asset, dismantle its fleets, and accept integration into the Concordant as a subordinate species. Failure, it warned, would bring what it called systematic purification of human worlds. Then, without ceremony, the image dissolved, leaving behind only a glowing countdown hovering above their heads. Deep beneath Colorado Springs, Admiral Jack Hayes stood in the command center, watching the same message for the 5th time. His expression was composed, but those who knew him saw the storm building in his eyes. Beside him, Commander Lisa Shaw was already pulling up tactical data and scanning every record on the Zthrian Concordant. "They can't be serious," she muttered, insisting that the human fleet outgunned anything seen in prior first contact scenarios. Jack replied that they were absolutely serious. The only question was whether the Zthrians were ignorant or arrogant. Turning to the communications officer, he ordered contact with President Monroe and every fleet commander in service. "We've got 3 days," he said flatly, "to show these visitors why threatening humanity will be the worst mistake they ever make." Across the planet, the response was immediate and unified in a way unseen for generations. Old rivalries over resources, colonies, and politics vanished before the enormity of the threat. Humanity had spent 2 centuries earning its survival among the stars, and those lessons had been written in blood. In orbit above Mars, Captain Daniel Cross received the alert aboard his dreadnought Defiance. The vast ship hummed with restrained power. Its experimental dark matter engines, a secret humanity had reverse-engineered from a derelict alien craft found drifting in the Kuiper Belt years earlier. Daniel read the Zthrian message twice, then keyed the shipwide intercom. His voice carried steady resolve as he ordered all hands to battle stations. "This is not a drill," he said. "They gave us 3 days. We'll be ready in 1. Throughout Defiance, the crew moved with the precision of long-honed drills, though none had truly believed this day would come. At the tactical console, Lieutenant Amy Foster sifted through every scrap of intelligence available on the Zthrian Concordant. What little data existed painted them as a mid-tier galactic power, maintaining control through sheer numbers and stolen technology scavenged from conquered species. They had never faced a true fight. "They don't know us," Amy said quietly. "They think we're like the others, divided and afraid to bleed." Daniel allowed himself a thin smile. "Then it's time we educate them." In the outer colonies beyond Jupiter, the response burned even hotter. Settlers who had carved lives from hostile worlds and outlasted pirates and radiation storms read the ultimatum with cold fury. On Titan Station, Governor Paul Bennett convened the Outer Territories Coalition and broadcast his message to every settlement across the system. "They ask for our submission," he said. "But humanity has never learned how to kneel." Paul declared that humanity would remind these aliens what they had learned while clawing their way out of Earth's gravity well: how to fight, how to win, and how to never surrender no matter the odds. The countdown continued its steady march toward 0 as diplomats scrambled to open communication channels, sending messages that went unanswered. Across the solar system, humanity's war machine roared awake. Shipyards that once produced colony transports and cargo freighters were retooled for combat within hours. Weapons deemed too destructive for ordinary wars were pulled from storage and mounted on every available hull. From her office overlooking Lake Geneva, Helen Carter watched troop transports streak through the night sky like falling stars. She had spent her entire career pursuing peace and building bridges between species, but now a different burden rested on her shoulders, one she was unsure she could bear. She turned to Admiral Jack Hayes, who had come to coordinate with the United Nations Security Council, and asked if they were doing the right thing. The Admiral gazed out at the growing formation of ships, points of light arranging into precise geometric patterns visible even from the ground. He said the Zethrians had offered two choices, kneel or fight. And humanity, he added, had never been particularly good at kneeling. Helen pressed further, asking what would happen if they resisted. Surely the conquerors would return with overwhelming force. Jack faced her, his eyes like tempered steel, and said coldly that they should let the aliens come. The Zethrians were about to learn a lesson written into human history. Every species that had ever met humanity had either become their allies or their memories. As the final seconds of the ultimatum slipped away, a broadcast went out from Earth on every frequency known to the galaxy. It was not a surrender, nor a plea, nor an attempt at negotiation. The message was clear and translated into every known tongue. The Zethrians have made a terrible mistake. They should have left humanity alone. When the countdown hit 0, there was silence for 3 long seconds. Then, throughout the solar system, every human warship, from the smallest patrol cutter to the colossal dreadnoughts, activated its transponder. A unified pulse of energy rippled outward faster than light, a deliberate signal of power. The Zethrians, expecting a scattered and terrified race, instead detected something their systems first labeled as impossible. A fleet of over 40,000 warships, each aligned in flawless formation and painted in light-absorbing black that rendered them nearly invisible in the void. Humanity called it the Black Armada, and it was not retreating. It was advancing. At the solar system's edge, the Zethrian response fleet emerged from quantum fold space with the arrogance of a species that had never known defeat. High Commander Zethallus stood on the bridge of his flagship, Eternal Dominion, radiating confidence. He commanded 300 warships, technological marvels that had crushed countless civilizations. He ordered his tactical officer to locate and destroy human defenses before they could mount a response. The Zethrians expected to find crude orbital stations and fragmented platforms, easy prey for their firepower. But when the first scans came in, confusion spread. The tactical officer hesitated before reporting that the humans were everywhere, surrounding them. Zethallus felt a flicker of doubt. He snapped that it was impossible, an error, and demanded a full recalibration. Yet the data refused to change. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Daniel Cross watched the incoming fleet with calm precision. The enemy had positioned themselves exactly where humanity's strategists predicted they would, because arrogance made them predictable. The Zethrians were walking straight into a trap. Daniel keyed the fleet-wide channel and ordered all ships to hold formation. "Let them see us," he said. "Let them understand what they've walked into." At the tactical station, Lisa Shaw tracked the enemy scans and confirmed they were actively painting human positions. "They see us," she said. Daniel nodded to Amy Foster. "Then show them everything." Amy's hands flew across her console, activating recognition protocols. Across the void, 40,000 warships simultaneously dropped their stealth coatings. Identification beacons flared to life in a synchronized display, a deliberate show of dominance before a single weapon fired. On the Eternal Dominion, chaos erupted. Zethallus stared as his sensors filled with red contacts, more than any concordant fleet had faced in memory. 300 against 40,000. The numbers were impossible, the outcome undeniable. He muttered that it must be deception, false signals, sensor ghosts, but the tremor in his voice betrayed the truth. Conviction hardened in Zethallus' chest as he ordered the launch of sensor drones. He needed proof that what he saw wasn't real. But the returning data crushed that hope. Every contact was real, every ship armed, and all of them converging from every direction. Far below on Earth, Admiral Jack Hayes stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic projections of the battle. President Monroe stood beside him, refusing to retreat to the safety of the underground bunker. Watching the engagement unfold, the president asked why the Zethrians weren't trying to flee. Jack answered with a single word: pride. He explained that the Zethrians had never tasted defeat. They couldn't imagine an enemy that could outmatch them. Then he opened a channel to the fleet commanders and gave the order to engage. Show them why threatening humanity is a fatal mistake. The Black Armada moved as one, a colossal organism of steel and fire. The outer rings of ships closed in, tightening the noose from all directions. The Zethrians tried to maneuver, searching for gaps, but there were none. Every avenue of escape was sealed by human warships. Captain Daniel Cross issued the command that would define history. All batteries, fire at will. The void erupted in blinding light. Thousands of ships unleashed their fury at once. Humanity's arsenal, shaped by centuries of war, innovation, and stolen alien technology, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Railguns hurled projectiles at near-light velocity. Energy lances cut through shields like silk. AI-guided missile swarms twisted and weaved, reacting faster than thought. On the Eternal Dominion, Zethalis gripped his command throne as the ship shook under the first barrage. Damage alarms screamed from every deck. He barked orders to return fire and reform the line, but it was too late. The Zethrian formation had already fractured. The human assault was too fast, too precise. Brilliant crystalline hulls shattered under kinetic impacts. Shields designed for energy absorption failed catastrophically against solid metal slugs moving at relativistic speeds. On the Defiance, Amy Foster coolly reported target lock on the enemy flagship. "All forward batteries ready," she said. Daniel's voice was steady. "Fire." 8 railgun rounds tore into the void, each the size of a vehicle and traveling at a fraction of light speed. The first 3 struck and fractured the crystalline armor. The 4th punched through, hitting the primary power core. For one fleeting instant, Zethalis understood the enormity of his failure. Then the Eternal Dominion exploded in a sun-bright flash that eclipsed the stars. The battle lasted 6 minutes. 300 Zethrian warships entered the system. Not one survived. The Black Armada suffered only minor damage, 7 ships scarred, none destroyed. In the aftermath, the wreckage drifted through space, silent monuments to arrogance and miscalculation. On Earth, Helen Carter read the battle reports with equal measures of awe and dread. Humanity had achieved total victory, but she knew what it meant. The Concordant would not accept humiliation. They would return stronger and angrier. "Is this just the beginning?" she asked. Jack Hayes nodded grimly. "They came to crush us. Instead, we crushed them. Now they'll come back with everything they have." He studied the debris field glittering on the displays and added, "We've sent our message. Humanity doesn't break, and it never kneels." Across the solar system, celebrations erupted, but they were short-lived. Every commander understood the truth. They had won a battle, not the war. The Black Armada immediately began preparing for the next assault. Everyone knew vengeance would come swiftly and without mercy. Aboard the Defiance, Daniel Cross stood alone on the observation deck, staring into the endless dark. Somewhere out there, the Zethrian Concordant was realizing their mistake. They had awakened something ancient and unyielding, a species that had clawed its way from a single planet through blood and ruin, learning the one law of survival: never surrender. Lisa Shaw's voice crackled through his calm. Long-range sensors detecting multiple quantum fold signatures, estimated 3 hours to contact. Daniel asked, "How many ships?" "Rough count, 2,000. Looks like a full battle fleet." The Zethrian battle fleet burst from quantum fold space at the edge of the solar system like an avalanche of crystal and fury. Grand Admiral Corthenis, commanding 2,300 warships from his flagship Starbreaker, carried with him the full authority of the Concordant High Council. His orders were absolute: annihilate the human resistance, make an example of their homeworld, and ensure that no species ever again dared defy the Concordant. With cold precision, he ordered his forces forward and deployed screening elements, vowing that these primitive humans would not catch them off guard twice. But as his fleet advanced toward the inner system, sensor returns began painting a picture that defied logic. The human fleet wasn't retreating or hiding behind planets and moons. Instead, it was accelerating outward, straight toward them. Aboard the Defiance, now flagship of the 1st Battle Group, Captain Daniel Cross studied the oncoming Zithrian formation. The enemy had learned from their previous disaster. They advanced cautiously now, maintaining tight formations and deploying scouts as an early warning screen. At her tactical station, Amy Foster noted that this time the Zithrians were using sound textbook tactics. Daniel replied coolly, "Being smart won't be enough to save them." He opened a secure line to Admiral Hayes on Earth and requested authorization to execute Operation Hammer. In the United Nations Command Center, Jack Hayes stood before a vast holographic projection of the battlefield. The plan Daniel proposed was bold, dangerous, and perfectly aligned with humanity's doctrine of overwhelming force at the decisive point. Hayes gave his approval. "Show them," he said, "what the Black Armada can truly do." Daniel switched to fleet-wide communications. "All units execute Operation Hammer. Break their formation." The Black Armada split into 3 massive wings, moving in perfect synchronization, a feat achievable only through years of relentless training. The central force of 10,000 ships charged headlong toward the enemy. The other 2 wings accelerated to port and starboard, their dark matter drives flaring to life, propelling them at velocities that made Zithrian fold drives look primitive. On the Starbreaker, Corthinus watched in disbelief as the humans executed a pincer maneuver on a scale no strategist could have imagined. He barked orders to reform and prevent encirclement, but the massive Zithrian fleet was too large and too rigid to turn quickly enough. The human ships were smaller, faster, and commanded by officers who had drilled for this exact scenario. Within minutes, order collapsed into chaos. The battle devolved into a vast, swirling melee. Human ships darted through Zithrian formations like predators among prey, striking with deadly precision aboard the destroyer Swift Justice. Lieutenant Kevin Gray piloted through a narrow gap in the Zithrian defensive line, while his co-pilot, Sarah Mitchell, handled weapons. After 5 years of service together, their coordination was seamless. "3 targets locked," Sarah called out. Launching missiles. A volley of AI-guided warheads streaked from the destroyer. Instead of dodging point defense fire, the missiles absorbed it, using the explosions as cover to scatter submunitions that rained down like metallic hail. One Zithrian cruiser's shields overloaded under the relentless barrage. A second later, a railgun slug from a ship 300 kilometers away smashed through the weakened barrier. The cruiser disintegrated, its crystalline hull bursting apart in a silent bloom of shards. All across the battle space, similar duels unfolded in a symphony of destruction. The Zithrians fought with valor and precision, the courage of a civilization defending its legacy, but they were locked in a war of attrition against an enemy with deeper reserves. Faster production and an unbreakable will on the Starbreaker, Corthinus finally understood the terrible truth. "They're not trying to win conventionally," he murmured. "They're bleeding us dry." His tactical officer clicked in grim agreement. "Every ship we lose is irreplaceable, Grand Admiral. Every ship they lose, they'll rebuild it twice over." The math was merciless. Corthinus made a decision that would haunt him forever. "Order a full withdrawal," he commanded. "Regroup beyond the heliopause and call for reinforcements from the core." But retreat under fire proved impossible. The human fleet pursued without mercy, their long-range weapons reaching out across the void to claim fleeing ships one by one. On the Defiance, Daniel Cross watched silently as Zithrian vessels were torn apart. There was no triumph in his eyes, only grim resolve. Every victory cost lives. Every destroyed enemy ship meant another human family grieving. But this was the price of survival, and humanity had already chosen to pay it. "Enemy fleet is breaking off," Lisa Shaw reported. "We've destroyed roughly 400 Zithrian vessels. The rest are retreating in disorder." Daniel nodded once. "Let them go." Several captains sent in aggressive pursuit vectors, eager to chase down the fleeing enemy and finish what they had started. Daniel overruled them. They had already made their point, and now, he said, they needed to prepare for what would come next. On Earth, Helen Carter was orchestrating the largest relief and recovery effort in human history. Wounded personnel were being evacuated from damaged ships at emergency speed, while massive convoys rushed to resupply the fleet with munitions, food, and repair materials. The few remaining diplomatic channels buzzed with frantic activity, trying to predict the Concorde's next move. During a brief meeting between battles, Helen told Admiral Jack Hayes that humanity couldn't sustain this tempo forever. Every victory cost ships lives and resources. Eventually, she warned, the numbers would turn against them, no matter how brilliant their tactics. Jack nodded grimly. She was right, and that was exactly why, he said, they needed to change the nature of the war. Helen frowned. What are you suggesting? Jack explained that humanity had already proven they could stand toe-to-toe with the Zrians and win. Now it was time to take the fight to the enemy, directly into the heart of concordant space. Helen stared at him in shock. You're talking about invasion, she said. That's madness. We barely even know where their core systems are. Jack's answer was calm but resolute. We know enough. And we have something they don't. He revealed that human engineers had successfully reverse-engineered quantum fold technology from the ancient derelict discovered years ago. Humanity could now reach deeper into concordant territory than ever before. Helen felt the weight of history settle over her. If we do this, she said softly, there's no going back. This won't be a defensive war anymore. Jack's expression hardened. The Zithrians made it something else when they promised to purify our worlds and erase our species. We're not the aggressors, Helen. We're just the ones who refuse to die quietly. In the outer solar system, the Black Armada regrouped and rebuilt. New ships streamed in from Mars's colossal shipyards and hidden asteroid foundries, each vessel painted in the signature light-absorbing black that had become humanity's symbol of defiance. Engineers worked tirelessly, repairing hulls, refitting weapons, and upgrading systems based on the brutal lessons of recent battles. Aboard the Defiance, Daniel Cross walked through the repair bays, nodding to exhausted mechanics and engineers. Sparks cascaded from welding torches as teams patched hull breaches and replaced armor plating. He stopped beside a young engineer, barely more than 20, sealing a fracture in the outer hull. "How are we looking?" Daniel asked. She looked up with a grease-smeared grin. "We'll have her combat ready in 6 hours, sir. The Zithrian weapons hit hard, but our hulls hit harder." Daniel smiled faintly. "Good work. Get some rest when you're done. We'll need everyone sharp for the next phase." Moments later, far beyond Earth's skies, humanity's first strike force entered concordant space, without ceremony, without warning. 500 ships, led by Commander Jake Morrison aboard the heavy cruiser Relentless, burst from quantum fold transit into the Vex core system. Intelligence had marked it as a minor Zithrian military hub, an outpost with supply depots and repair facilities that sustained their frontier fleets. "Combat spread," Jake ordered as his tactical displays filled with contacts. "Prioritize orbital stations, then surface installations. Remember, our target is logistics, not conquest. No civilian casualties." The Zithrian defenders scrambled in disarray. Years of guarding a safe rear system had dulled their edge. They were ready for pirates, not a full-scale human fleet. The engagement was swift and absolute. Within hours, every military installation was reduced to drifting wreckage. Before the first shots were fired, Jake had ordered repeated broadcasts on all civilian frequencies, warnings and guarantees of safe passage. Humanity was not in this war to slaughter innocents. They were here to send a message. When his tactical officer finally reported the system secure, Jake Morrison simply nodded. Humanity had crossed the line and there would be no turning back. They reported only light losses on the human side until the officer added something that stopped the room cold. Transmissions were coming up from the planet below. The feeds carried messages in dozens of tongues, all variations of the same plea. The Concordance client species were begging for aid and protection. They saw humanity as potential liberators, a force that could tear off the chains of Zithrian rule. Jake opened a direct line to Admiral Hayes at once. The situation had just become far more complex. On Earth, the political consequences were already spiraling. Helen Carter stood before the United Nations Assembly, now effectively humanity's wartime council, and delivered the facts with unflinching clarity. The Zethrian outpost had been destroyed, she said, but 17 distinct species were now asking for help to overthrow concordant domination. If humanity answered that call, it meant committing to a liberation campaign across dozens of star systems. If they refused, they risked losing potential allies and appearing hypocritical, champions of freedom only for themselves. President Monroe leaned forward and asked Admiral Hayes for his military recommendation. Hayes, whose uniform still bore the fresh decorations of recent battles, stepped to the podium and spoke plainly. Humanity should help them. Not because it would be easy or anticipated, he said, but because it was the right thing to do. The Zethrians had built their empire on conquest and enforced servitude. Humanity would dismantle it by offering what the Concordant never did: freedom and self-determination. The vote was nearly unanimous, a handful of abstentions barely registering. Humanity would no longer merely defend itself. It would become the spark for rebellion throughout the Concordant. Far from the human assemblies, the Zethrian High Council convened in panic on their capital world, Prime. Grand Counselor Biexthar listened to reports with growing fury. In under one standard week, humanity had struck 6 systems and demolished military assets worth fortunes. Worse, uprisings were flaring across conquered worlds. Vexithar demanded to know how such chaos could erupt. He raged that the humans were supposed to be primitives, a single-system species barely fit for interstellar travel. The military advisor, a scarred veteran named Rolf, spoke the brutal truth no one wanted to hear. The humans had been catastrophically underestimated. Ralph explained that human tech matched Zethrian systems in many fields, that their tactics were unpredictable and inventive, and that their resolve was absolute. Most dangerous of all, he warned, was the collapse of client loyalty. Conquered species were defecting, seeing humanity as liberators offering real freedom. Vexithar thundered that the Concordant would crush humanity with overwhelming might. He ordered the full mobilization of fleet and resources to teach the humans, and their sympathizers, the cost of defiance. But Ralph hesitated, voice low with reluctant reason. Committing the entire Concordant fleet to offensive operations risked leaving core systems exposed. Intelligence suggested the humans were plotting something far bigger than hit-and-run raids. Vexithar waved off the concern, confident their full might would be decisive. Yet Ralph, having studied human engagements, knew better. He had watched their creativity, their ferocity, and their readiness to sacrifice for survival. They fought not for land or wealth, but for existence. And that made them the most dangerous foe the Concordant had ever faced. At the outer edge of Concordant space, the Black Armada amassed for the boldest strike yet. 30,000 ships gathered at a captured supply depot, crews steeling themselves for an operation that would either end the war or doom humanity to extinction. In the Defiance's main briefing hall, Daniel Cross addressed hundreds of captains over a holographic conference. Behind him, a vast star map blazed their objective in cold white: Zet Prime, the Concordant capital, the heart of their civilization.